What's up, and in today's video we're gonna go over the Ruy Lopez opening. This is one of the openings that you guys have asked me for a long time because usually it leads to maneuvering complicated game which is difficult to comprehend, and my students usually complain about that. So I've developed a variation that is aggressive and a lot simpler to learn, and I'd love to share it with you today. So, of course, if you're playing this position as black at all, you are going to be ready to face this move bishop b5 because it is nearly equally popular to the move bishop c4. Both moves are very common. So what to do if white goes bishop b5? At first, you play pawn a6, pushing the bishop one step back, and then what I recommend is this move pawn d6. And it's a very deceptive variation actually, because at first it looks like you're playing this old-style Steinitz defense, but in fact you've got something completely different in mind. After white castles, which is the most popular move here, instead of just playing bishop d7 and playing this defensive move, we're going to be a lot more aggressive and we play bishop g4. First of all, putting this ping to the knight, and secondly, a little spoiler, in many of these variations we're actually going to castle queenside and develop a Russian attack on the kingside, and this is going to be a complete nightmare for white because that's not what they were hoping for when they chose to play the Ruy Lopez opening. They were hoping for some maneuvering game with a slight advantage of white, and you instead turn it into a massive attack against white. Okay, after bishop g4, your opponent will often play pawn to h3, trying to get rid of this bishop, but you're going to continue playing pawn h5, setting this nice little trap along the way. And what's nice is that we do not really rely on this little trap because h takes g4 will be a losing mistake for white. And some of your opponents will fall for the trap, but even if they don't, we don't care because that's part of our plan anyway. So, but just a quick overview of this line. If white captures here, this exposes this h file, and you're gonna checkmate white real quick. For example, if white plays something like knight h2 or knight e1, doesn't really matter, then you bring your queen out, and now your pieces are lining up against white's king, and that is game over. Basically, if white moves their knight, you just checkmate white. It is worth knowing that if white tries moving their pawn forward at some point, trying to create this escape path for their king, you can shut it down by playing pawn to g3. Now the king is locked, and the checkmate is going to come soon. Coming back to this position, we do know that pawn takes g4 is a deadly mistake for white, and what are they going to do if not? If not pawn takes g4, then usually your opponents are going to be really annoyed by this pin, because in most cases they have no idea how to deal with it and how to get rid of it. By the way, if you're curious to know, I've got another video where I cover this pin in general, not just in the Ruy Lopez, but in any opening, and you may check it out later. But for now, let's come back to our stuff. They'll usually play the standard move pawn to c3, as they usually play in the Ruy Lopez, and then you continue with the move queen f6, which is also a really cool move. It's a very multifunctional move, because first off, you're putting pressure onto this knight, so that if you want to, you can trade there, break up white's pawns, which is nice. Secondly, that possibly is clearing the path for your king to castle queenside. It doesn't mean you're gonna do that instantaneously, but you got this opportunity. If you want to hide your king, you'll be able to do that. And finally, from here, your queen is watching over the square d4, preventing white from pushing their standard move pawn d4, which could help white get some activity, but your queen now is looking towards this and is getting ready to trade and to win the pawn there if white tries d4 against you. For that reason, most of your opponents will play pawn d3 instead, a more modest move, just trying to develop. Then, generally speaking, your plan is to castle queenside and to chuck your pawns forward on the kingside and to develop a Russian attack there. That's, in a nutshell, what your plan is. Of course, you're going to be careful. We're going to also see what white is going to do here. You cannot play g5 right away because white is ready to capture this pawn. So that's not an option. Also, you do not want to castle right away because white can trade here on c6 and destroy your pawn shield and maybe have some attacking chances. So what do you do instead? You play knight to e7, which provides support for this knight so that you don't have to care about white taking it any longer. And also it is an awaiting move. Since white is annoyed by this pin, they will always play knight to d2 trying to defend it. And as that happens, that also blocks this bishop onto c1 so that it no longer attacks this diagonal, and you can play g5 freely because white cannot capture this pawn anymore, and you start this massive pawn attack on the king side. Again, there is not much white can do really to stop this, so they'll play something like rook e1, their standard move, or anything else. You play bishop d7, another elegant move which combines neutralizing this pin and you just clear the path for your pawn to go forward and to attack white. And believe it or not, after a series of natural moves, white ends up with a completely lost position and they have nothing to do. They are defenseless, really. There is nothing they can impose to your simple and crushing attack on the king side. In this game, we're analyzing they tried knight h2, which is a decent move, anticipating black to go g4, but you play there anyway. g4, breaking open white's king side, and after this trade, now your rook is getting involved into the attack. White here played knight to f1, which is a good move, you know, trying to reinforce their king side. And you cannot checkmate white instantaneously, but you simply continue your development, you're castling queenside, and you're going to have this long-term attack, and ultimately you are going to checkmate white. In this game, white played pawn to f3, trying to, you know, maybe give some space for the king or trade off this pawn, I don't know. But black found a nice little combo. He played pawn g3, sacrificed the pawn over here, because after that, there was a nice follow-up. Rook takes h2, eliminating one of the defenders, and after a king takes, there is queen h4 check follow-up. Check to the king, it is forced to move, and now black won 2 minor pieces for the rook, and they continue their attack. I mean, you can play bishop g7 and bring the other rook to the h-file. You can use your knight and bring it somewhere there to h4 or to f4, and you have material advantage on top of all of that, and these crushing attacks, so that is easily winning for black. And in general, that goes to show you the usual attacking plan of black, because you're going to use the same plan against various different moves of white. Your plan will always be the same. Is there anything that white can potentially oppose to your attacking plan on the king side? Well, in this position, some of your opponents, instead of playing more modest move pawn to d3, some of them will play d4, because that's how white usually plays in the Ruy Lopez opening, and also white is trying to deflect you from your attack on the king side. And if white plays d4, that kind of overlooks the fact that you just brought your queen out to f6, and from here it does control the square d4 indirectly, and you can just snatch this pawn on d4, and you do just that. So first you play pawn b5 to neutralize this pin, so that your knight is free to go, and after bishop goes back, now you're ready to win this pawn, so that we also eliminate this defender, so that it no longer defends the pawn, and after white trades it with the queen, we do make this exchange, and now finally we are ready to win this pawn on d4, and we are pawn up. So if white captures, you're ready to recapture, you're pawn up. So basically white pawn to d4 failed. By the way, it's worth pointing out that if white goes bishop d5, that's not a problem really, because you've got a simple defensive move knight to e7, which both defends this knight and also threatens the bishop on d5. So in fact, bishop d5 is just wrong for white, it doesn't achieve anything. Okay, to recap this section of the video, we can see that against your move pawn to d6, if white castles kingside, this is a really light-hearted decision that gets white under a strong attack. You know, I cannot really say that castling kingside is wrong, but in a real-life chess, that is wrong, because that gives you an opportunity to play bishop g4 and to develop that attack on the kingside as we discussed with queen f6, pushing your pawns forward in the future and developing this attack against white, who's usually clueless to how to counter that. Okay, let's get it back. Is there anything else white can do? Sometimes your opponent, after you played pawn to d6, will be tempted to play pawn to d4, trying to somehow, you know, take advantage of this pin. In that case, you can neutralize this pin very easily, pawn b5, and after bishop b3, you can trade on d4, pretending like you just want to exchange. And after this exchange, there is a relatively well-known trap, but lots of your opponents are still unaware of it. If they continue to take here on d4, that is actually a losing mistake, but it's hard to notice it. The thing is, black can go pawn to c5, attacking the queen, and as it goes back, you're ready to play pawn c4 and capture the bishop, which has nowhere to go. Now, if white goes queen to d5, you gotta be careful, because for a second the queen attacks this rook, so you cannot play pawn to c4 right away. But there is a simple solution. You play bishop e6 first, attacking the queen, also covering the f7 square. Now the queen is attacked, and as it goes back, you're ready to play c4 to execute your main idea. If white delivers this check, you still attack it once again with the bishop. The queen goes here, and now finally you play pawn to c4. So by relocating your bishop to d7 with a tempo, you defended this rook so that it is no longer attacked, and now white is basically losing the game because you simply win a bishop for nothing. And finally, let's cover the move pawn to c3. So what to do if white goes pawn c3 instead of castling kingside? which is also, pawn c3 is a very standard Ruy Lopez move. By the way, if you don't feel confident in this Ruy Lopez opening overall, I do recommend that you check out this video where I just explain this opening in simple terms so that you can really have some general understanding of what's going on here. Because I gotta confess that up to the master level, perhaps, it was really difficult to me to comprehend what's going on here and what am I supposed to do about that. So I wish somebody recorded a video like that for me years back. Okay, after c3, you cannot really develop this attack right now on the king side because there is no king there, right? So it doesn't make sense. But after white plays pawn to c3, you can actually utilize the drawback of this move. And the drawback is that the pawn from here takes away the natural development square for white's knight. It can't move there any longer. And you can hit white's center by playing pawn to f5. Again, using the fact that white cannot simply defend it with their knight. This square is occupied. And so f5 is somewhat unpleasant for white. You are attacking this pawn, threatening to capture it. If white captures here, then you develop your bishop, which is nice. White will usually castle here in most cases, and here instead of playing normal development moves, you can also play bishop d3, a very nice move to lock white's position. It attacks the rook, but besides that, it just locks white's position. The pawn can't move, so the bishop cannot move, the knight cannot move, the rook cannot move. You locked it completely. Anyway, white will need to remove their rook first. Now you can play bishop e7 to develop it and to also cover your king just in case. White will be annoyed by this bishop, and in most cases they play bishop c2 trying to get rid of it. Now you trade on c2, and now you simply develop knight to f6. So basically, although it may seem like there are a lot of variations here, but in fact black's moves are logical, and in most cases you just develop your pieces. So these moves are simple to remember and to comprehend. Now white will play d4, trying to break open in the center to open their bishop. But you play e4. You don't want to just trade and give more space for white's pieces. You want to keep your strong center, and now we attack the knight. As it goes somewhere, doesn't really matter. If it attacks the pawn again, we can solidify our pawn chain in the center by playing pawn d5, and you see that life's good, really. I mean, you have the strong center, you have more space actually, and you're one move away from completing your development, so everything's cool. Also, there is a nice little trap that we set along the way. Most of your opponents will be tempted to play knight to e6 because it looks like a winning move, which attacks the queen and this pawn on g7. But in fact, it is wrong, and it allows you to win the game. But again, lots of your opponents aren't aware of this. In fact, it is beneficial for black to play h6, trying to force white into this move. But lots of your opponents will lightheartedly go there themselves. And if knight e6 attacking the queen, then you just move the queen away, attack this knight. White happily grabs this pawn, but after king to f7, white finds themselves in a losing position because this knight from g7 has nowhere to go. It is trapped. This square is controlled by your knight, this square is controlled by your queen, therefore the knight is really trapped. White can try to defend it with the bishop, but then you can just attack the knight once again with your bishop, and now you're going to capture it on the next move, and you get a winning material advantage. By the way, you may wonder like, hey, but Igor, it's all nice, we win a piece, but our king is exposed, can't white use it to attack? Not really, because think about this, on the next move you're going to gobble up this knight and trade off this bishop, and white will literally have 0 attackers on the king side, and they cannot attack you if they have no attackers, so your position is completely safe and winning. Sometimes you ask me in comments how to counter this attacking plan when you're playing white, and I've got another video where I cover that, as well as some common errors in the Ruy Lopez, which is worth knowing. Also, if you want to know how to level up your positional understanding, how to raise your strategic understanding of chess, I've got this free masterclass that teaches a couple most valuable lessons about that. Hope you enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up if you did, and I'll talk to you soon.